Congratulations, you've made it halfway through Overwatch League 2023. The spring stage went by in an absolute blur. But before zooming on to the next destination, let's take a look back at how everybody did. Vegas Eternal. They're exactly who we thought they were. Not that it's some sort of stunning revelation, but the Vegas Eternal were terrible. A winless qualifier with just one map win puts them up there with one of the worst starts in Overwatch League history. And at the current pace that they're going, they could match the 2021 Valiant in map wins. And it helps that they're practically playing with a handicap every single game thanks to very poor execution from certain individuals. When you watch the Eternal play, you see something hopeless. They have been the absolute worst team in the league by far, and nobody's surprised. And if things keep up the way they have, then it won't be long before they're sitting at the same table as two other very infamous rosters. Hopefully the impending changes can save them. Midseason grade, F. Los Angeles Valiant. You might actually win a game. Disclaimer, there is no guarantee that anything actually is going to happen for the Valiant in any sort of positive way this year because they're not exactly set up for long-term or even short-term success, but even so, I think they have shown a pretty good desire to improve. They've actually put up a fight in a couple of their matches, and if they don't win many games, if any at all, I don't think anybody can deny that they're at least trying to make things interesting. The Florida and Shock games give me at least some kind of hope. They found their niche with that slow-paced Ramatra comp while playing around Seeker and CJ, and while it didn't quite pan out in the first half of this year, it's the back half where things could be a bit more manageable, especially with Vegas Eternal upcoming on their schedule. This team deserves a lot better, and I'm praying that they figure something out and can just get at least one win, so they don't become the first team ever to have two different winless seasons. But regardless, they are winless right now still, so we can only give them so much praise, so I'll go with a D as their mid-season grade. Shanghai Dragons. The crack pipe is highly addictive. You promised us that you'd stay clean, Moon. You swore off these urges literally years ago. What were all those years of rehab for, man? 3 years of sobriety and a championship is still less appealing than your crippling off-rolling fetish? I swear to God, anytime this guy coaches a team that isn't top tier, he does some of the weirdest stuff. The Fleta tank experiment is not it, brother. Especially when you refuse to let him play anything aside from Winston. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? And honestly, this might not even be the most insulting part of their season. The fact that you lost, not just to one, but two contenders teams is rather concerning. They're very fortunate that they somehow beat Dynasty and have at least some kind of bright spot with that DPS line. But man, those guys can just not do it alone. They need some kind of actual tank partner if they want to get better and be more respectable moving forward. It is time to put your selfish desires aside, Moon, and get a real tank for your team. Marvel is literally right there, bro. Make it happen. Mid-season grade, D-. Seoul Dynasty. Healing takes time. You know, I had high hopes for the Dynasty and that they could at least somewhat be competitive in the East. It's not a very stacked region at all, and the offseason pickups on paper really weren't the worst, but we quickly found out the hard way that this team is very much different from last year's. And if we're being truly honest with ourselves, most of the time Prophet and Void were the only guys doing anything. The low production of those rookies really set them back. Their meta struggles and inability to progress essentially made the Dynasty a two-man show with no true synergy and very little explosiveness. How the hell did this team beat Seoul Infernal? They literally couldn't even beat Shanghai or contenders teams, and now they find themselves as one of the bottom teams in the league. It's not a hot take to say this or anything, but this is genuinely the worst that this franchise has looked since 2018. Now, thankfully, Seoul seemed to recognize that changes have to happen, and I think it's a great start to swap PH out for somebody like EasyHan, but they definitely need some more help. Because if things continue like they have, and they don't make any additional adjustments, the Dynasty are going to end up having their worst season in franchise history. Mid-season grade, D. London Spitfire. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If there is one thing to take away from London's spring stage, it's that you shouldn't try and be something that you're not. I get it. You're trying to adjust with the times, especially in the current meta that definitely works against you. But sometimes you have to do what you need to survive. Sometimes you gotta look towards what gives you the best chance to win. London went about these adjustments all wrong, because with every lethal and Skyrippa substitution that we got, we felt our sanity slowly starting to descend. Whenever those two came into the game, the situation felt absolutely hopeless. This team cannot play dive, and considering that London aren't supposed to be world beaters, you might as well stick to what you know. Cause guess what? Anytime they broke out Junker Queen or Reinhardt with their normal lineup, they were noticeably more competitive. Stop trying to escape your destiny, London. You're already in a pretty decent hole as it is. It really can't get much worse, so you might as well play what actually gives you a decent shot of winning these matches. And if there's any good news heading into half 2 of this year, it's that the new Mei and Cassidy buffs just might throw them back into relevance, but I guess we'll see soon enough. Midseason grade? D. San Francisco Shock. Contender success does not equal OWL success. The Shock's performance in the spring stage has drawn the line. I am never succumbing to the hype of previous Contenders teams ever again. The success rate of dominant Contenders rosters reuniting in OWL is so painfully low. This team was supposed to be different, but no. In reality, history continues to repeat itself. The Shock might be the most hyped up young roster of all time, and right now they're flopping hard. Obviously, there's still a lot of time to turn it around, but right now, it ain't looking good. When you fail to do much of anything against the top rosters, and then you struggle to beat the mid-tier ones when you yourself are supposed to be one of the best, obviously people are going to label you as fraudulent. And the craziest part about it is the Shock actually have so many different problems. For a while it was the living situation, then you have the whole support line and them playing way under their potential and not having any sort of discipline whatsoever. You have the fact that the Shock have no good DPS help outside of Proper, and that they can't play any real off-tank heroes. There's so many fundamental problems, and I can't help but just feel bad for Proper, whose prime is being absolutely wasted. San Francisco have been exposed as a young team with pressure that might be too high for them. The Shock have their work cut out for them if they intend to become respectable and turn their season around before it's too late. There is a lot riding on the line in terms of their futures right now, and if they don't pick things up, we're gonna start thinking for the worst. Don't let us down. Midseason grade? D. Dallas Fuel. You're on a historic path, but not in the good way. The defending champs are not off to the best start in 2023. Let's not beat around the bush, folks. It is mad disappointing to see a champion play such lackluster Overwatch. They're literally in this middling tier all by themselves. Not good enough to be at the top, but not bad enough to be at the bottom. They're just okay. And to a certain extent, it's understandable. They lost some very important players over the offseason, and this meta has not been the greatest for them. But I don't know how much of an excuse you can make for them. They are literally the world champs. They still have a lot of the same players, and the same coaching, and you move to a weaker region. In years past, they have figured it out. They have found ways to get over that hump. But so far in 2023, it has been the exact opposite. They have been struggling constantly. Hanbin can't dominate like how he used to. The DPS line looks very human, and the support line has just been okay. They've definitely gotten better since the start of the year, but nothing to suggest that they're moving on to a new level or anything. And at the rate that they're going right now, they just might miss out on the playoffs entirely. And that's pretty bad, considering that every single defending champ in years past has at least kept their record above a 50% win percentage, and they made the playoffs. Dallas would be the first champ to not meet that benchmark. The Fuel are in a very dangerous situation right now. We don't know if the meta is going to help them out in the future, and you just expect more from a roster like this, so it's quite disappointing. Midseason grade? C-. NYXL. Earning back trust is hard, but clearly not impossible. I was firmly on the hate train with these guys. I really did not see the vision during the preseason, and at first, all that hate seemed pretty justified. But over time, they worked at it. Pretty much every member of this team was looking to get a second chance this year, and they'll fight to hell and back if it means they get to stick around. The efforts that we have seen from Creative and that DPS line have made the NYXL a respectable mid-level team. At 3-5 with just a -3 map differential, NYXL is in a pretty good spot for a team that was supposed to be near the bottom. This is not a bad record at all. Most of their games have been relatively close, and even if they've had some chokes and some questionable decisions, you've gotta like where they're sitting right now when considering what they were supposed to be. Cause right now, they're in the thick of it for a play-in spot, and you know that if their execution was slightly better, their record could have been pretty good this stage. The NYXL are getting better and better by the day, and a lot of their guys have showed massive potential, so I think that if they continue to go down that trend, and they maybe get a better meta swap, then they're going to be in really good shape. Midseason grade? C+. Toronto Defiant. Sometimes the power of friendship is not enough. Well, that didn't last very long, now did it? The American Tornado dream lasted all of 9 games. The expectations and the confidence coming into this year were so incredibly high. It's the power of friendship, man. They're full of talent who were so good on American Tornado. They showed as rookies that they're OWL caliber. They just beat Boston in the Pro-Am. They're competent. They're top 5 in NA potentially. And yet, the moment the regular season actually started, Toronto felt completely lost. My only question is, what happened? They literally couldn't play a single team composition. They couldn't play Tracer Sombra. They couldn't play Dive. They couldn't play Rush either. And it felt like the coaching and the players never really made any sort of significant adjustment to at least try and improve. They kept doing the same thing over and over and over, and by the time they finally realized, it was already way too late, leading to this slight roster overhaul. Considering the high expectations and where Toronto are currently at, this is unacceptable. The only good news at this point for Toronto fans is it's not too late to turn things around. Their record isn't the worst in the world, and there's a real chance that Spectra and Opener could give this roster a breath of fresh air. There's still time to not be mid-Toronto, but here in the present, when we evaluate what they showed us in the first 9 games, it has been terrible across the board. Midseason grade? D. Vancouver Titans. 4th time's the charm. The Titans are finally fun to watch again after 4 painful years. No questionable signings, no hype and burst, there's only been like 1 game they haven't truly been in. They have demanded respect from even the top level teams right now, showing that the Titans can be a threat on just about any day. After years upon years of waiting, Lenny Time is finally unleashing his true power on the league. We've waited 4 long years for this moment, and every moment of him and Aspire together has been glorious. And you know, people made fun of Vancouver for getting their other players for being too Boston-like, but you really can't hate on them with the results. They've been clutch across the board, making the Titans one of the most well-rounded rosters in the league. Vancouver's become one of my personal favorite teams to watch, and I think they're definitely worth paying attention to. That said, it shouldn't get too overblown. 4-4 and a knockout appearance is only a start. The Titans unfortunately still lack the big feats to consider this anything more than slightly above average. They're pushing some good teams pretty far, and that Boston win was pretty good too, but without the W's to back this stuff up, there's only so much praise that you can hand out. It's a start, but I'd like to see a bit more. Midseason grade? B-. LA Gladiators. With change comes struggles. The Gladiators are like a roller coaster ride. There's big ups, big hills to climb when they're punching above their weight class and nearly making it to Korea, but big downward falls from those blowouts. Gladiators, despite the downgrades, are still pretty competitive, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that considering that the downgrades they had during the offseason were pretty significant. It's just that when compared to last year, there's obviously a step back that's going to be unavoidable. Less star power means that it's less about dominance and being at the top and more about survival. It's about hanging in there and praying to the Lord that Kevster pops off. The Glads are one of the biggest beneficiaries of that any given day mentality. The consistency isn't quite there with them right now, but they're hella fun to watch when they're on, and they can push some pretty good teams to their limits. It's just unfortunate that they've had these brutal downs that drag down their stocks. Like, they could be in such a better place than what we see right now, but it is very hard to ignore those blowout losses, the chokes, and missing Korea altogether. Like, it's a perfectly acceptable start to the season, but nothing spectacular. Midseason grade? B. Washington Justice. Motivation is a powerful ally. Oh yeah, this was the exact start the Justice were looking for. They faced a lot of criticism for quite a few reasons during the offseason. Some signings were seen as nepotism, and others questioned how good Flora and the backline could be. And could the Justice in general just be something more than mid-tier or low-tier? Well, as it turns out, this added a lot of fuel to the flames. Pretty much every member of the Justice, both player and coaching-wise, had a massive chip on their shoulder. Hearing all that noise and complaining, plus their own frustrations of having to prove themselves all over again, proved to be a deadly combo. All those faces chasing the same dream has led to perhaps one of the best stories in the league. Led behind their superstar DPS, the Justice managed to output a top record in the West and make the loser semis in the knockouts. There's been some dominant showings from this group, and when they're not winning, they've at least had some competitive performances against the high-level rosters. They had a couple of hiccups so far, but so did most teams around their placement, so not the biggest deal in the world. This team wasn't anything amazing, but they showed potential, and they definitely demand your respect. Midseason grade, B. Guangzhou Charge. It's not about how you start, but how you finish. It kinda looked for a while like the Charge were gonna be the surprise #1 team of the year in the East. Extremely good efforts from Choi Se-won and Jimmy had the Charge coming out of the gates on fire. When you lose just one qualifying match and get the top seed in the East, you really can't ask for a better start. All that was left was to be clutch and get the job done, and against familiar opponents that you've already proven yourselves against, that shouldn't have been a problem. But this gets me back to my initial point. How you start really isn't important. It's how you do when everything's on the line that's really going to matter in this year's format. And as the Charge have shown time and time again since 2021, this is usually when they crack. Their lack of Sombra and Ramatra was a real setback. Being too one-dimensional finally caught up with them, and Choi proceeded to have his worst game of the season in a winner-go-home scenario. A reverse sweep L to the Hangzhou Spark and a loss to Dreamers back-to-back is unacceptable. When the lights were at their brightest, the Charge laid an egg. It's good that they showed they're capable at least, but finishing in the knockouts is very important in the East as your performance directly correlates to your chances of making the playoffs. It is not a good look for the Guangzhou Charge, and now they have a couple of question marks surrounding their legitimacy heading into half 2. Midseason grade, B. Seoul Infernal. You can't take the Philly out of Seoul. Oh, Seoul. We have seen this movie way too many times. When push comes to shove, Philly's gonna Philly, name change or not. Their mid-season madness performance was not ideal, and considering how they did in general this year, and how some of the other teams did in this tournament, top 3 actually felt so doable, and it's tough to see them go out this way. On the bright side, it's not all bad if you like the Infernal, because their first half in 2023 was pretty darn successful. You proved that you can beat literally any team in your region, and you showed some massive performances in the clutch. And with Mag and Skewed working out as well as they have, Seoul Infernal easily have one of the most well-balanced rosters. But with that failure to beat any team from the West in mind, there's obviously some work to do if they want to be a contender. Mid-season grade, B+. Hangzhou Spark. You're the best in the East. For now. It's not much of a compliment, but I don't think anybody can deny, at least here in the present, that the Spark did a better job than any other team in the East when it truly mattered. You tack off some points for having a rather inconsistent qualifier, but they did prove over time that they are better than the Infernal and Charge when it comes to being clutch. They performed the best in the knockouts and the mid-season madness. The Spark are showing that they win when there's actual stakes, which is obviously a lot more important than some kind of regular season meetup. The Spark and their veterans are showing exactly why they possess the highest ceiling in APAC, and it's pretty ridiculous because they're doing it basically as Winston one-tricks. When Shy, Leave, and even Monk can play like this when at a disadvantage, just think about what might happen if they're playing more up to their strengths and the meta changes for the better. The Spark aren't perfect by any means, but I think they showed just enough to demonstrate that they can still be a dark horse in this league if all the stars align. Mid-season grade, B+. Boston Uprising. Never judge a book by its cover. Boston are showing that sometimes having the right individuals and making good decisions before it's too late can overpower those false narratives and inner struggles. Before this season began, the Boston doubt was at an all-time high. The boomed rumors were absolutely wild, and I'd say that some of their early season results reflected upon this. But after a crushing loss to Vancouver and the firing of their assistant coach, they fixed their issues and focused up big time. The final result of said efforts? A trip to Korea. Boston didn't just beat their boom delegations, they destroyed them with some quality wins. Decay and Twilight have transformed into absolute superstars that have made the Boston Uprising a multi-level threat. However, for a team full of champions, they don't always feel like one. They played down to their competition on more than one occasion in the first half, and honestly, sometimes they just laid down and died without putting up any sort of real fight, which obviously tanks their chances of being in that top team conversation. Some of those execution issues could be worked out over time though, so it's probably not the end of the world. What really matters so far for Boston is that they didn't fall apart. That's all we were really looking for in the first half. Now they can progress and go from there. Midseason grade, B+. Florida Mayhem. You are the bounce back kings. There's a very obvious trend developing with the Florida Mayhem this year. The first half of 2023 was all about second chances. For every screw up they had, there was a big performance taking its place. It's like they need that shock to their system. Something to humble them. Get upset by the Gladiators? Make a lower bracket run to Korea. Get upset by the Spark? Finish third place in the midseason madness. The Mayhem are somehow one of the most clutch and anti-clutch teams at the same exact time. When they're in the danger zone, their clutch factor goes up like tenfold, but it always requires some kind of sacrifice to get there. Some might say that it's a bad thing, but this is really good for a future playoff scenario. This is great experience for a young team like this. This builds up their confidence and shows them that they can play well when it actually matters, when there's real winner-go-home stakes on the line. Like, I want to say that I'm worried about the Mayhem for playing like this, for having these inconsistencies, but I can't deny their incredible ceiling. Third in the midseason madness and the third best record in the West is quite solid. Of course it comes in flashes with these guys, but they are definitely one of the most versatile and explosive teams when they're on. It might have been a little rocky at times, but the Mayhem have definitely lived up to the hype. Midseason grade? A-. Houston Outlaws. There's always a bigger fish. Memeing aside, it's kinda the truth in a way. Houston Outlaws are without a doubt better than 17 Overwatch League teams, and that is no small feat that is absolutely worth celebrating. This Houston team has panned out in the best way possible. They've got a top 2 support line. The Happy experiment has worked out quite good, and they have multiple players in that Rollstar/MVP conversation. And on top of it, they just had their highest finish in a tournament of all time. Most teams cannot even hope to touch them. I mean, only one team has actually beat them. They've handed them 3 different L's this year. Which gets me back to my Star Wars meme. The bigger fish in this scenario is of course Atlanta Reign. And until that obstacle is finally cleared, Houston fans can never rest easy. And that's unfortunate because with this kind of roster, it is obviously championship or bust. You had a taste last year of what success is like in the playoffs, and now it's time to push to the finish line. They have gotten very close, which is definitely why I don't want this to sound negative. They did lose to Atlanta Reign multiple times. This is true, but they're also the only ones who have shown they can be a challenge for them, and that is a good thing because you'll get another crack come playoffs. And if the meta maybe changes in a certain way, maybe it's you holding up that trophy in the fall. And when you factor in an otherwise excellent stage so far, I'd say that half one was a resounding success for the Outlaws. Midseason grade? A. Atlanta Reign. You're number 1. What else is there to really say aside from that, you know? Atlanta Reign from start to finish were the most dominant team of the spring stage, 11-0 and their first ever stage title. There is basically no flaws to point out in this scenario. They were the best Sombra team, they had the best DPS line, the best support line, and they won nearly every game with relative ease. It is one of the most convincing starts to a season of all time. Their core is so ridiculously deep. The clutches from Fielder and that DPS line were off the rails. Atlanta Reign are so far ahead of just about every other team. People maybe have some questions still on if they can maintain this with a potential meta shift in the future, which is obviously fair, but here at the midpoint, there is absolutely no denying that they are the best team in the world. Midseason grade? A+. Well, that's pretty much it. The teacher has handed out all of his grades. That is something I walked away with for all 19 rosters in the Overwatch League here at the halfway part. Obviously, there is still a lot of Overwatch left to be played, and there's still plenty of teams who can take control of their own destiny and turn things around before it's too late. Time to find out who's real and who's the phony. If you enjoyed this video and you want more Overwatch League content just like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I appreciate all of you watching this video so much. It means the world to me. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.